There's nothing more central to Bloodborne than the blood itself. I mean, it's literally in the title. And if you're up to date with the lore of the game, you'll know that it plays much more of a sinister role than it first lets on. While the Healing Church would lead you to believe that the blood is incredibly valuable for its potency as a medical aid, it's also turning the streets of Yharnam into a dangerous place, populated with beastly townsfolk. A couple of months ago, I was watching a video titled "I Do Not Understand Bloodborne" by Peter Spittech, where he stated,
"A friend of mine once argued that Bloodborne's premise could be read as an allegory for Ronald Reagan's war on drugs. There's a free video essay idea for anyone with some time on their hands."
This analysis seemed incredibly interesting to me, so I emailed just to check it was free reign for me to make this video, and I got a very lovely response telling me that it was okay to go ahead. So a massive thank you to Peter for the video idea, and definitely go check out his channel. In this video, I plan to sketch out a narrative parallel between Bloodborne and the United States government's war on drugs. This video is going to assume that you know the bare basics of Bloodborne's story. Obviously, I will mention the parts of the lore I'm going to be drawing on, but I'm not going full lore scholar like I did with the Havel video. Do I think Miyazaki wrote Bloodborne as a commentary on the US government's war on drugs? No. Is it fun to theorize on and point out similarities between the two? Yeah, of course it is. I wouldn't have made this video if I didn't think so. Although I don't think this is the true, secret meaning of Bloodborne, I do think it's an incredibly interesting perspective. As per usual, the sources will be cited in the Google Doc in the description, and I'm sorry for the quality of footage. My PS4 is over a decade old, and I'm not buying a capture card for a single video. It'd be of value to our investigation to draw a link between the Healing Church's blood and drugs. Thankfully, this can be easily done. In-game, they are already used as drugs, not recreational but pharmaceutical drugs. Just like how morphine, codeine, and OxyContin can all be obtained through medical prescriptions, yet at the same time, have high levels of recreational usage or abuse. And on top of this, the in-game description for blood cocktails draws parallels between the blood and recreational drugs. In Yharnam, they produce more blood than alcohol, as the former is more intoxicating. Intoxicating can be read in two ways, both accurate to the qualities the blood possesses. Intoxicating could mean that it'll get you, well, intoxicated or inebriated. We know that you can get crunk off that Yharnam blood, as the terminology used is literally being blood drunk. We learn this from the eye of a blood drunk hunter. A hunter who goes drunk with blood is said to be taken by the nightmare, destined to wander forever, engaged in an endless hunt. The second reading of the word intoxicating might imply that one could develop an addiction towards the blood, as in, I was intoxicated by her beauty. It's luring you in for more. Again, we know that this is a property that blood has, as stated by the blood vials. No surprise that most Yharnamites are heavy users of blood. We can also see a form of drug regulation or legal policy relating to the consumption of substances going on within Yharnam. The item description of the beast blood pellet states that it was banned by the Healing Church due to its unclear origin. I find there to be an interesting parallel with the rapid, almost careless uptake of the blood by the Healing Church, to the usage of how now restricted substances by medical professionals, prior to properly understanding the impact and lasting events it can have on a patient. For example, heroin was previously used to combat patients addicted to codeine and morphine following their course on said medications, as well as sleeping aids and a cough medicine. During early usage, heroin was actually referred to as a wonder drug, very similar to how the Healing Church's blood is used to treat any and all illnesses. Cocaine was administered for local anesthesia and toothache, and LSD was prescribed broadly to the mentally ill. Admittedly, this is a little different from what we're discussing, but between the 20s and 50s, it wasn't uncommon to see doctors on advertisements for cigarettes. As much as I'd like to believe that our modern understanding of medicine has progressed a lot, it's not unthinkable that some of our contemporary pharmaceutical drugs may be regarded as bad as heroin in 100 or so years. Speaking from experience, there's no sane world in which promethazine should be handed out as a sleeping aid. Now you might be thinking, for this alternative reading of the story to work, the United States government would have to be the ones distributing the drugs, like how the Healing Church are the ones performing blood administration. Initially, blood administration was used for its medicinal properties. By injecting this special blood into their patients, it acted like a panacea of sorts, curing any and all ills that the people of Yharnam may have been experiencing. News of this spread to nearby lands, inviting those seeking salvation to travel to Yarnum, and the Healing Church grew ever more famous for its art of blood ministration. So the Healing Church are the ones creating and distributing the blood to the people of Yarnum. But the US government wouldn't do something like that, right? Right? On the 3rd of November 1986, news broke that the US government had been performing off-the-books trades with Iran, providing Iran with military-grade weaponry. They hoped in return that Iran would send home many of the Americans still hostage in West Asia. The US government would send the missiles to Israel, who would mediate the deal, eventually shipping them off to Iran. This was bad enough, as Reagan's government was explicitly breaching the arms embargo that former President Jimmy Carter had set up following the seizure of the US embassy in Tehran and the wider Iranian hostage crisis of 1979. What made this undercover operation even more problematic is that the profits of these illegal trades and sales were funneled to the Nicaraguan paramilitary group known as the Contras. Despite earlier funding and organization from the Reagan administration and the CIA as part of the US fight against communism, since the Contras' primary objective was to overthrow the Socialist Sandinista National Liberation Front, or the FSLN, the US government had been prevented from providing any more aid to the Contras' cause, as per the Boland Agreement. This was due to the overwhelming amount of human rights violations committed by the CIA-backed group, such as executing civilian leaders, killing aid workers, kidnapping young girls, and generally breaking the laws of war. The interesting part here is that the Contras were widely known as distributors of cocaine, and many have made the claim that the CIA themselves had a hand in spreading this cocaine to primarily black communities in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Obviously, the US government and the CIA denied this happening, with the classic, "We investigated ourselves and found no wrongdoing." Moving from the cocaine of Latin America to the opium of West Asia, if you're unaware, opioids such as morphine, fentanyl, heroin, and codeine all have their source from one plant, or a synthetic version of the chemicals found in said plant, this being the opium poppy. Countries like Iran and Afghanistan host the perfect climate to grow these plants, and despite Afghanistan no longer being the world's top producer of opium poppies, that title now belongs to Myanmar, they are by far the most famous for it. The US government has had vested interest in destroying Afghanistan's opium trade, whether out of the goodness of their hearts or to financially cripple the nation. I couldn't say. Yet, taking a closer look at opium poppy production, and you would almost believe that if anything, America was helping it to grow. When the US government released footage of Operation Iron Tempest, a year-long bombing campaign in Afghanistan aimed to destroy heroin laboratories, it caught the eye of one Dr. David Mansfield. In 2017, when the footage was released, he'd already been studying the Afghan opium industry for over 2 decades, and concluded that whatever the US was bombing, it had nothing to do with opium poppies. Following months of investigation and analysis, Mansfield argued that while the United States presented Iron Tempest as a resounding success, he believed that they were bombing just random mud huts, and the data suggests he's right. At the turn of the century, opium production and cultivation plummeted to below 30,000 hectares due to a full-scale ban implemented by the Taliban in 2000. However, following 9/11 and the subsequent war on terror, this number shot straight back up. In a 7-year period of American involvement in Afghanistan, opium production had shot up to 270,000 hectares, an amount far higher than pre-war numbers. Production peaked in 2017 at 3,300,000 hectares, just to plummet once again in 2022 to 23, this time by 95%, coincidentally just as Biden's administration pulled out of the region in 21. It would be quite the claim to say that the US government is aiding the growth of the opium industry in Afghanistan, but it's fair to say they aren't doing much to stop it either. This extends much further from the poppy fields of Afghanistan right to the hospitals within America itself. Since America does not have a public health service, changes cannot be done in-house, so to speak. Medical aid is left within the hands of private companies, whilst the government can only regulate them, something that they've routinely failed to do. In 2017, the same year as the peak of the opium poppy production in Afghanistan, a commission reported that the ongoing opioid crisis was partly caused by inadequate oversight from the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. In fact, The FDA often fails to enforce its own rules when regulating new drugs, such as when it allowed the broad uses of oxycodone in 1995. Note that this is just a single example and not an exception. The methodology the FDA uses to test and approve new opioid medication, enriched enrollment randomized withdrawal, or EERW, is highly controversial and has been the subject of extensive criticism. Instead of giving one group a placebo and the other medication, EERW gives both groups the medication, then removes anyone with a negative reaction to the opioids from the study. The remaining group of people are then split in two, with one half being given a placebo. Essentially, since only 1/4 of the group remain on opioids, quote, efficiency results are skewed in favor of the subjects who remain on the opioids. This is because opioid-dependent subjects who are switched to a placebo experience opioid withdrawal symptoms, including increased sensitivity to pain. Moreover, switching opioid-dependent subjects to a placebo renders the study not truly double-blind. Due to this, mass amounts of unsafe drugs are being prescribed to the American public. Of course, the fact that companies are being allowed to dictate prescriptions isn't helping the epidemic. A lack of oversight and regulation on the part of the US government allows these pharmaceutical companies to often overprescribe opioid medication, in some cases to the point of addiction or overdose. Congress reports that the pharmaceutical companies consistently prescribe a greater number of opioids at higher doses at a greater range of stages of treatment and for a greater number of conditions per capita than other countries. On top of this, governmental opioid guidance is non-binding for health providers. I repeat, the guidance the government gives for companies handing out incredibly addictive and dangerous drugs is non-binding. People coming off their course of opioids are often left without aid, and so will naturally turn to other means of fulfilling their newfound addiction. To get more on track with the war on drugs, I think another interesting parallel to be drawn here is between the countermeasures both the Healing Church and the US government took in the war on drugs, particularly the militarization of the war. It sounds a little silly to say since obviously a war will be militarized. However, when war is used in the context of the domestic sphere of policy, such as the war on AIDS, you wouldn't expect an escalation in militarized presence. Typically, when you declare a domestic war on something like AIDS or illiteracy, you'd anticipate new policy in that area, that this issue would become a focal point for your government's legislation. The same cannot be said for the war on drugs. During the war's infancy, the Nixon administration attempted to stop the flow of drugs coming from their source, shutting down routes from Latin American countries, like Colombia and Bolivia. If you plug the leak on a boat, well, then the water should stop rushing in. Taking this perspective, drugs appeared not as a societal or cultural issue, but rather an issue of law and order, of policing and national security. This is why agents such as the Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA, saw billions of dollars of investments come their way, why police officers were provided with more and more equipment to counter the narcotics industry. The question of why people were taking drugs was not asked. Instead, Nixon declares America's rising drug problem as purely a matter of national security. Since the 1970s to the mid-2000s, government spending on the war on drugs rose from $1 billion to over $19 billion annually. Typically, this money is not going towards rehabilitation centers, mental health facilities, or any of the proven ways to reduce substance abuse or the harm drug abuse can cause. Instead, a large portion of that money is going towards the DEA and the INL, the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, with the rest landing in the pockets of for-profit private military companies that the government pays to fight their war on drugs. Framing the problem of substance abuse as a matter of national security allowed for the rapid militarization and privatization of counter-narcotic agencies. A tough-on-crime route of policy has not led to a decrease into the amount of people taking recreational drugs, but only a surge in incarceration rates, impacting working-class and black communities the hardest. More on this later. In Bloodborne, we see a similar route being taken in regards to countermeasures against addiction. We learn that the hunt was concocted as a means of disposing those affected by the beast scourge, the problem that the Healing Church themselves created. It involves one night of total massacre. Hunters, employed by the church, go out and slaughter any of the affected. Groups like the Powder Keg Hunters and Gurman's Workshop Hunters are both examples of militarized groups cleaning up after the Healing Church. Like the US government positing drug usage as a matter of national security, the Healing Church doesn't direct the problem inward. The question is not, should we stop giving people this substance that turns them into beasts? The question is, how do we get rid of all these beasts? Even looking at the type of language used in the item descriptions lends itself to addressing the beast scourge as a problem of security. From the Black Church set, most Healing Church hunters are elementary doctors who understand the importance of early prevention of the scourge, achieved by disposing of victims, and even potential victims, before signs of sickness manifest themselves. Their black attire is synonymous with fear and that peculiar Yharnam madness. When a cancer is discovered, one must pinpoint its location, reach in, and wrench it from the host's bosom. And from the Harrowed set, these hunters are keen to early signs of the scourge, serving as the first line of defense against its outbreak. Or perhaps, when the time is right, they find signs of the scourge where there are none. Obviously, the comparison cannot be fully drawn, as the Healing Church has a much grander problem on their hands when compared to some teenagers smoking weed in rural Philadelphia. Yet we can observe a likeness between the methods of quote-unquote prevention both the Healing Church and US government have taken during their respective war on drugs. I also find it interesting when you consider that one of the reasons theorized for why the citizens of Yharnam are so xenophobic and hostile towards outsiders is because they believe that the outsiders are the ones causing the beast scourge. You can hear this from their dialogue interactions. Get away, you plague-ridden rat. It's all your fault. Cursed beast, and no, I'm not one of you. One could argue that this mirrors the way in which the US government has shifted the issue from drugs from a domestic one to a foreign one. It's not that America is a capitalist dystopia with failing social services and people will turn to illegal means to get a brief respite from their lives. No, it's these evil foreign countries like Mexico and Colombia that just want to funnel in drugs right under our noses. I mean, haven't you seen Breaking Bad? Walt didn't cook meth to pay for cancer treatment because America doesn't have a nationalized health service. No, it was Tuco Salamanca and that guy from Far Cry 3. The reason why the Healing Church not only split from Byrgenwerth, but started administrating blood to the population of Yharnam came from ideological reasons. They wanted to forcibly evolve humanity using the old blood. Essentially, they wanted control over the population. Whether it be for good means or bad, the scholars decided that a guided hand was needed, and that hand would come from them. In a similar way, the US government has been all the more happy to experiment with drug usage on civilians to garner this same type of control. I cite Project MKUltra as prime evidence of this fact. However, for the US government, there is a far different reason for why they want to wage this war on drugs. This is kind of straying off the topic of Bloodborne, but I feel it's the natural conclusion to what we've been talking about in this video. On April 8th, 1864, Congress passed the 13th Amendment, one of 3 amendments that came following the Civil War. You may already know this, but this is the amendment that abolished slavery within the United States. But did it? You see, the amendment itself reads as such: neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. Take notice of the second sentence here, except as a punishment for crime. It's a loophole that's kept slavery alive within America. Many prisons have and still do currently use slave labor, and if you're paid a wage, the rates you'll be working at are next to nothing. The highest I could find was in New Jersey, where you have the chance of being paid $2 an hour. The national average for the highest possible wages was a measly 63 cents. At first, it appears to us that the sheer amount of incarcerated prisoners should pose a problem to the United States. Despite only making up 5% of the world's population, the US bolsters 20% of the world's inmates, and you already know that these rates began to spike following Nixon's war on drugs. Yet having such a high prison population is economically advantageous for the states, because they can use these inmates as free labor. As dystopian as this sounds, it gets even worse. Due to the rising number of inmates, overcrowding, and a general strain on the prison system caused by Reagan's reignition of the war on drugs, private prisons were introduced. These are, as they sound, prisons run not by the government but by private businesses. In states like Montana, almost half of inmates reside within these for-profit prisons. Of course, since the 13th Amendment does not discriminate on whether these prisons are state-run or run by businesses, it means that these for-profit prisons have access to a growing number of slave laborers. In a survey run by American Civil Liberties Union, 76% of responders reported that they were forced to work out of threat of further punishment. 70% said that they could not afford basic amenities with the wage they were paid, and 64% said that they felt concerned for their safety whilst working. While the aims of the Healing Church is not to exploit Yahwehnites for free labor, I do believe there's a through line of intent that we can call comparison to. The American government isn't putting people into prison because they're big, scary, evil villains. I mean they are, but that's not the reasoning. They do this because it's profitable. They have a constant supply of free labor that can be exploited for whatever purpose the government or company wishes to use it on. It was reported in 2019 that 4,000 plus companies were actively profiting from the prison system, growing by 800 companies a year. America incarcerates at such a high rate because it strengthens their economic power. In a similar way, the Healing Church is wholly interested in retaining their position of power within Yana. They create propaganda to mislead citizens, they cover up atrocities and the fact that the blood they hand out is killing their inhabitants. The blood exists to control the Yanamites, not just physically, through getting them hooked on its intoxicating qualities, but mentally too, by placing the Healing Church as the primary saviors of the town. Furthermore, as I've already stated, the reasoning for why the Healing Church has gone all in on blood administration is for entirely selfish reasons. Just like how a small number of people continue to profit from the prison industrial complex. Even if the Healing Church did not know what they were doing at the time, specifically when they used blood to heal those affected by the Ash and Blood Plague, they've continued their usage of blood administration knowingly of how it changes people. For what end purpose? To ascend people to the level of Great Ones, even though the only time we've seen that actually happening was from using the methods of Master Wilhelm, the person the Healing Church split with. With that, I believe I've laid out some of the primary ways in which Bloodborne's story can be read as a parallel to the US government's war on drugs. Again, a massive thank you to Peter Spittech, and thank you for watching all the way through. If you want, please subscribe so I don't have to get a real job. I've been Unijoy, and you have been entertained.